Chapter 3. Wob had always been a gloomy little bear, and the string of misfortunes that came on him just as his mind was forming made him even more sullen and morsel. It seemed as though every one was up against him. He tried to keep out of sight of the upper woods of the Piney, seeking his food by day and resting at night in a hollow log. But one evening he found it occupied by a porcupine as big as himself and as bad as a cactus bush. Wob could do nothing with him. He had to give up the log and seek another nest. One day he went down to the Gray Bull Flat to dig some roots his mother had taught him were good. But before he had well dug, a grayish-looking animal came out of a hole in the ground and rushed at him, hissing and growling. Wob did not know it was a badger, but he saw it was a fierce animal as big as himself, and he was sick and lame as well. So he limped away and never stopped until he was on the ridge of the next canyon. Here a coyote saw him and came bounding after him, calling at the same time to another to come and join in on the fun. Wob was near a tree, so he scrambled up the branches. The coyotes came bounding and yelping below, but their noses told them that this was a young grizzly they had chased, and they soon decided that a young grizzly in a tree means a mother grizzly's not far away, and they had best let him alone. After they sneaked off, Wob came down and returned to the Piney. There was better feed on the Gray Bull, but everyone seemed against him there, now that his loving guardian was gone, and while on the Piney he had peace at least some time, and there was plenty of trees that he could climb when an enemy came by. His broken foot was a long time in healing. Indeed, it never actually got quite well. The wound healed and the soreness wore off, but it left a stiffness that gave him a slight lump, and the sole balls grew together quite unlike those of the other foot. It particularly annoyed him when he had to climb a tree or run fast from his enemies, and of them he found no end, though never once did a friend cross his path. When he had lost his mother, he lost his best and only friend. She had taught him much that he had to learn by bitter experience, and would have saved him most from all the ills that befell him in his cubhood, ills so many and dire that but his native sturdiness he never would have passed through alive. The piñons bore plentiful that year, and the winds began to shower down the ripe, rich nuts. Life became a little easier for Wob. He was gaining in health and strength, and the creatures he daily met now started to leave him alone. But as he feasted on the piñons one morning after a gale, a great black bear came marching down the hill. "No one meets a friend in the woods," was a byword that Wob had learned already. He swung up the nearest tree. At first, the black bear was scared, for he smelled the smell of grizzly, but when he saw it was only a cub, he took courage and came growling at Wob. He could climb as well as the little grizzly, or better, and high as Wob went, the black bear followed. And when Wob got on the smallest and highest twig that would carry him, the black bear cruelly shook him off, so that he was thrown to the ground and bruised, shaken, and half stunned. He limped away moaning, and the only thing that kept the black bear from following him and perhaps killing him was the fear that the old grizzly might be about. So Wob was driven down the creek from all the good piñon woods. There was not much food on the Gray Bull now, the berries nearly all gone. There was no fish or ants to get, and Wob, hurt, lonely, and miserable, wandered on till he was away down towards Mietzi. A coyote came bounding and barking through the sagebush after him. Wob tried to run, but it was no use. The coyote was soon upon him. Then with a sudden rush of desperate courage, Wob turned and charged his foe. The astonished coyote gave a scared yowl or two and fled with his tail between his legs. Thus Wob learned that war is the price of peace. But the forage was poor here. There was far too many cattle, and Wob was making for a far-away piñon wood in the Mietzi Canyon when he saw a man, just like the one he had seen on that day of sorrow. At the same moment he heard a bang, and some sagebush rattled and fell just over his back. All the deadly, dreadful smells and dangers of that day came back to his memory, and Wab ran as he had never ran before. He soon got into a gully and followed it into the canyon. An opening between two cliffs seemed to offer shelter, but as he ran towards it, a range cow came trotting between, shaking her head at him, snorting threats against his life. He leapt astride a long log that led up a bank, but at once a savage bobcat appeared on the other end and warned him to go back. It was no time to quarrel. Bitterly, Wab felt that the world was full of enemies, but he turned and scrambled up a rocky bank into the pinyon woods that bordered the benches of the Mietzi. The pine squirrels seemed to resent his coming and barked furiously. They were thinking about their pinyon nuts. They knew that this bear was coming to steal their provisions, and they followed him overhead to scold and abuse him, with such an outcry that an enemy might have followed him by their noise, which was exactly what they intended. There was no one following, but it made Wab uneasy and nervous, so he kept on till he reached the timber line, where both food and foes were scarce, and here on the edge of the mountain sheep land, at last he got a chance to rest. End of chapter 3.